Welcome to this presentation of the Paper Street Podcast. Welcome to Late to the Party, a program on the Paper Street Pictures Podcast Network. Your hosts for the following are myself, Shawn Talley, joining me as he traditionally does, a fellow member of the Paper Street Pictures production team, a man who keeps real busy. He can take in $350 a week, sometimes even more when he does it off the meter. Mr. Cameron Burns, how are you, sir?
I love that even back then, like you see the Uber drivers try to do now, he's doing it off the meter, trying to make an extra buck. Like when that Uber driver gives you his card.
I've not had an Uber driver myself try to do anything off book because that would be quite shady, but
they do.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do.
Also, for people who don't know what we're talking about, because apparently you didn't look at the picture before you clicked on this, we're doing Taxi Driver this week, and we're talking about taxi driving. That's the line from Taxi Driver. So be prepared.
Yes, we'll get into how some things just don't change, including people doing stuff off the meter and the way we might take care or not take care of veterans. Prescient stuff in this here film that I'm sure you've heard of, Martin Scorsese's 1976 classic. For those who have not listened, I usually let Cameron do this. I'm going to let him do it again because he's got it down pat. Tell the folks who may be tuning in for the first time because they happen to be fans of Charlie Talbert or just this movie, what is kind of the gist of this program, Cameron?
Yeah, so thank you for coming. Any fan of Charlie Talbert is a friend of mine. So what we do here is we just find friends, fellow film lovers, fellow film people who work in film, and people that we would just want to have a conversation with. And we say, hey, what's like the big zeitgeisty movie that you haven't seen? And you might be shocked to find out that pretty much everyone has a handful of huge movies they've never seen before. It's just a numbers game, really. Like there's not enough time in the day to watch everything. And so, we just kind of reach out to our buddies and people we think would make interesting conversations. And we say, what haven't you seen? And they say, I haven't seen Taxi Driver. And we go, what? And then we bring them on the pod. We talk to them for a little bit. We send them out to watch the movie, and then we bring them back and talk to them for a little bit longer. So that's what we're doing here with Taxi Driver and Charlie Talbert, and I'm excited to get to it.
Yes, sir. This is one we've had Raging Bull as one of our early episodes of Graham Skipper. So this marks our second Marty and our third De Niro, actually. Not that these are in any kind of order, but if you happen to catch the whole catalog, you'll notice we've done Heat, Raging Bull with De Niro as well. This is one that shocked us because Charlie being quite the thespian, we thought maybe he'd seen some of the more iconic De Niro roles. Come to find out he's not seen three of them as you get to the end of the show. You'll learn.
Yeah, and as we'll talk about later, he actually went back and watched some Scorsese movies because he was up for a role in Killers of the Flower Moon and still managed to miss Taxi Driver. So we really did the world a service by finally sitting him down and making him watch it. And I think it's going to be exciting.
Indeed. And your relationship with this movie, Cameron, as I know you were a huge Raging Bull and Scorsese fan, mostly, I would say, right?
Yeah, I was the one who was kind of beating the drum for Raging Bull. You were kind of in the middle, and Graham was kind of left lukewarm on it. I similarly love Taxi Driver. I think even more so than Raging Bull, I think Taxi Driver is my favorite Scorsese movie and probably a top 10 American movie of all time for me, maybe a top 10 movie of all time for me, period. I think it's the zenith of the Scorsese group of films, and I think a movie that I watch, every once in a while and still holds up incredibly well every time I see it. All-timer performance, all-timer film. I can't wait to get back into it. What about you? Where do you stand on this one?
So my first viewing of this movie was actually in college in my 20s, and I believe I've only seen it 2 times since then. So while I appreciate and do acknowledge it as a great film, I've probably not seen it enough. So this will be a fresh watch for me in the interim here. But happy to revisit this because it has been a minute, and I do enjoy it. I do remember liking it very much. And again, just the way people talk about it, too. It's interesting just how it lives now in the world. So we'll get into that and a whole lot more. But first, let's ask Charlie Talbert why he has never seen this film.
Let's grill him.
Yeah. And joining us for this installment, he's an actor who's appeared in shows including Hap and Leonard and Love and Death, films including Angus and The Big Short, more recently even in pictures like Rebel Ridge and Megalopolis, as well as Paper Street's own features Camera Obscura and the upcoming Shelby Oaks. And if I may rip a piece from his own IMDb bio, he lives by the mantras, there are no small parts, only small actors, and every little bit helps. He's a man I've not found to be small in any way personally, be it stature or personality. He is our pal, Mr. Charlie Talbert. Charlie, thank you for joining us.
You kidding me? I'm super stoked to be here.
I love it. Any day with Charlie is a good day, so I'm excited for this podcast.
Also, I found out there are small parts.
Turns out we've been giving you small parts this whole time and no one told you.
Nobody told me. No,
Oh,
baby.
man. It's going to be a lot harder to get him in the future, Sean.
Charlie's the kid that had the shop teacher that was like, there's no stupid questions, just stupid people. And then later on, he's like, oh, no, there are also stupid questions.
Hi. I'm sorry. Exception to the rule. Pleasure to meet you.
When you're in the game, as long as Charlie, you do find out, yes, indeed, there are small parts. But again, he is no small man. He is a large personality who we love very much. One more thing about Mr. Talbert. He has never, as learned a filmgoer as he is, this man has never seen the 1976 film Taxi Driver.
I have to be honest, this one shocked me because I know Charlie to be an avid film connoisseur. So I was very surprised. Charlie, what happened here?
Look, so you know, like how Bugs Bunny should have made a left at Albuquerque. So the thing is like everybody kind of pushed this movie down my throat growing up. You're in movies? You gotta see Taxi Driver. You're in movies? You should be booked on this thing. You should do that. And I was like, first of all, it's hopefully I can do that. And then like, second of all, don't tell me the things I need to watch because then I get like deterred from watching them because it's the thing that I'm supposed to do. It's like telling somebody, don't eat that candy. Oh, that candy's going to be eaten. But if you tell me to eat that candy, then I'll be like, that's a little suspect. But it's not just that. On top of that, and I looked at the cast, I watched the preview of it last night, not like the show, just the commercial for it, the old school commercial. And I was like, man, I love all of these actors. And, you know, and I was like, but the one thing I remember when I was going to attempt to watch this like decades ago was I kind of liked where I knew Robert De Niro as a performer. I was born in 78. So just at my age, when I started getting interested in watching De Niro stuff, this was well past, you know, Mean Streets and all that and Taxi Driver. So we're talking about an older De Niro.
Rocky and Bullwinkle, go on.
Yeah, you know, the heavy stuff.
Meet the Parents. You love Meet the Parents, Robert De Niro.
No, before that, let's bring it back a little bit.
Cape Fear? How about Cape Fear?
Casino, like Cape Fear. You know, this is the De Niro I know. But then also, I'm familiar with Jodie Foster, and I'm an SNL guy. And I remember her being on SNL, Jodie Foster being on SNL back in the day as a little girl, and then I just didn't want to see the dynamic of an older guy and younger girl. I mean, it just was weird, and the boundaries in the 70s and stuff. So it was just something, my own mentality. I just didn't want to watch it, you know, and I wasn't into a film like I was after I got into the business. What I liked about film in general was the escapism from my only problems that I would have with my mom, like beating me up or something, or being picked on at school. So I needed humor, you know, I needed that humor, and I needed to use that to become who I was as a performer, etc. I mean, I'm built for sitcom, and we just don't make those anymore. But it was like one of those things where like those kind of films, my roster, my goal as an actor was basically to work with the actors that I enjoyed. Like I've worked with most all the living cast. In fact, I think all the living cast now with Animal House and oh God, what is the movie? Real Genius. So
do you have a bingo card with Animal House cast?
I do. Yeah. In fact,
Nice.
D-Day, who I just got done working with on Love and Death, he was the judge, and I was just like, "You did it, man! You completed my bucket list."
You showed him your bingo card, and you're like, "Look, I crossed it all the way across."
I got directed by Jamie, who was like the president of the fraternity and Animal House, and I was like, "Oh, nice! No, I just need D-Day." And years later, D-Day, I was like, I did it." So
Your work here is done.
Taxi Driver wasn't one of those things that I was going to be like, yeah, I need depression and weirdness and psychotic schizophrenia because I don't have enough of that with my own family. I need, so I just never gravitated towards it. And even when I was up for Killers of the Flower Moon, it wasn't one of the movies that I chose to like go in and kind of study his work. I went to Mean Streets and things like that. And seeing that, and seeing De Niro there kind of just knowing what he was like there kind of informed me what he might be like in Taxi Driver. So I kind of also didn't want to see that. I want my chronological order to come natural when it comes to film.
Shawn, I'm concerned that we are going to ruin Robert De Niro for Charlie Talbert. I am very concerned all of a sudden that he is not going to like this mean-spirited dad from Meet the Parents.
My concern, I believe, is that this is the first repeat director, and we are 0 for 1 with Scorsese watches, as Graham Skipper had put off Raging Bull his whole life. He didn't really take to it, so...
You know what else I haven't seen?
Raging Bull.
Raging Bull.
Well, you know what? This is our yearly Charlie Talbert episode. Next year could be Raging Bull. So we're going to keep doing this podcast until someone fucking likes Raging Bull. That's what we're going to do.
Cameron likes it enough for everybody. It's a fantastic movie and has a
Damn right.
very specific place in film history, and it's earned that, as a few Scorsese films. It's interesting, Charlie, though. I know Graham's kind of a push with it was he's more of an empathetic viewer, and Charlie's expressed that too. He wants an escape. That said, I think Charlie will recognize, like Graham did, the craft and the just like there's some iconic pieces of this movie. It's very much one of the great movies about loneliness, and Paul Schrader was the writer, Scorsese the director. Like, it's got a pedigree, of course. I do think Charlie will come away with maybe a slightly more positive reaction than Graham.
Well, I also think that this is arguably Robert De Niro's best performance. So if for no other reason than that, I think it's definitely worth a watch. But yeah, I am curious now if Charlie's going to take to this one or if it's going to be a little too dark, because if you're going in looking for levity, you may have come to the wrong place. So,
well, that's the thing. I'm not the thing is now is I'm not looking for levity necessarily in things that I watch. Then I needed it as a form of escapism. Now I need it as a form of study I'm trying to broaden my horizon and become more of a heavy when it comes to film. So watching these projects now, I now have to see what this Charlie, this 45 and in 1 week 46-year-old man is going to be in the future, and what would he be doing if he were De Niro in this movie, and what would he be doing if he were, J.D. Evermore in this movie. And it was I worked with Francis Coppola on Megalopolis, and it was a treat and a blessing. But there was a gentleman on there who is a still photographer for Scorsese, Coppola, and De Niro, and has been doing it forever and a day. His name's Phil Caruso, a very talented photographer. And he goes, "Man, you're a bit of a chameleon, aren't you, Charlie?" And he just came out of the blue and started talking to me. And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, I was looking at what you've been doing and the different characters you're playing. And he's like, I see this transformation almost in all the pieces that you do now. And I go, oh man, wow, well, thank you, A, for even thinking of me, but B, the fact that someone like him is noticing that kind of stuff, it's letting me know that I'm going in the right direction. So watching this should be a treat for me now. It's just the reason I stayed away from it for so long is because this wasn't me then.
It'll be fun for you to watch this and be like, oh, I get this. This is why the Paper Street guys keep hiring me to play fucking creeps all the time. This is what they're looking for. We need this. The whole thing has taught me, Shawn, that we need like sitcom Charlie in something. We need.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have
to stop casting Charlie as a crazy person and start casting Charlie as a humorous person.
No, we owe a lot of people a lot of things, and I do think we owe Charlie a non-creep role down the road. There's no doubt.
We do. Life also owes Charlie a non-creep role. He's working on it. He's getting there. But so to round this all out, it's other people's fault that Charlie has not seen this because they told him to, and he is not a man who gives in to temptation, is what I understand.
That's pretty close. I do give in to certain temptation. It's just this particular instance, I felt like if I went ahead and watched it, maybe I would be scorned from being into Scorsese. And the thing is like, I want to enjoy and watch these people and hopefully work with them someday. I mean, we came super close on that project, but then again, working with different directors and different people like you, like absolute Camera Obscura, when you guys had me in for that was the first time on film that I was allowed to play somebody that was emotionally damaged. And I really thought, wow, there's something to that. So I'm very much looking forward to this viewing A Taxi Driver, and also remembering that it's called Taxi Driver and not Taxi here.
Well, there is a show called Taxi, which you would probably also like.
No,
I have been studying Danny DeVito this whole time.
Wouldn't it be great if we came back and Charlie just watched like season 1 through 3 of Taxi, and then we just talked about that, and he's just like talking about Christopher Lloyd,
Kanicki. I mean, Andy Kaufman. What?
Oh man, that reminds me of the show. Oh, what a who's who! What a who's who that show had. So Shawn, I like this. This is interesting. I'm not sure where this episode's going to go, and I like that. I could be come back and Charlie's fired up about how much he hates the movie. You never know. We'll see. I have high hopes because I know that the Charlie Talbert from Camera Obscura, that character would like Taxi Driver. We'll see now if the real Charlie Talbert likes it. But yeah, I'm excited. I like when we go into the watch unsure of what's going to happen.
You just come back and my feet are dangling in front of the camera, just midair.
He's always got to go dark. Gallows humor, Charlie.
You're ready. You're in the right mindset for Taxi Driver.
Gallows humor, and then he actually referenced Gallows.
Yeah, it's true. Literal Gallows humor.
All right, let's. You know what? Let's wrap it up, and we'll send Charlie on his way to watch this film, and then all of us will return in just a moment to the listeners' ears here to get Mr. Talbot's fresh thoughts on this film and much more. So stay tuned.
Let's all go to the movie and have ourselves a snack.
Hey there, welcome back. What was mere seconds for you, the listener, was a good deal more for us. When we last left off, our guest Charlie Talbert had not seen Taxi Driver. He was late to the party, but we were glad he made it, and we welcome him back, a more cultured individual, a more learned film viewer, someone who has now seen Martin Scorsese's 1976 film Taxi Driver. Not only that, we happen to fall on this man's birthday as we're recording, so we appreciate him coming back for this talk. Charlie, are you feeling any of those things? More cultured, more learned, older?
Okay. We're back.
Use your breathing, Charlie. Use your breathing.
Oh, we're okay. I feel it's the future now. I feel none of those things. I do feel that I have now seen a movie that I would have not normally watched on my own fruition.
That's
so
what we do here.
I don't know if I feel learned, but I definitely was transported to a time when New York's streets were filled with trash, and they were having all those issues with that, and just that feel of people coming out of the Vietnam War and what they do with themselves, and it's just one of those things where I definitely feel different now that I've seen the movie, but it has not substantially changed my life.
Well, that is a shame.
That's fair.
I will say, fun fact, first of many fun facts, this movie was shot during the Manhattan garbage strike. So that is not set dressing. That is real New York trash in the streets. And yeah, it is. You hit on something that I kind of love, which is I had never been to New York until a couple of years ago. So it's not like I grew up in New York or anything, but I'm a big fan of New York 70s and 80s sleaze movies. Horror has a lot of these, and I like the Basket Case and movies like that, and Street Trash. And I love that back in the day, New York was just this cesspool kind of.
Yeah.
And I'm here for it. So Charlie, rumor has it you saw this movie not once, but twice, way from above and beyond the Call of Duty. But also, what are kind of your kind of, overview, initial reactions? How did the film hit you? Did you hate it?
No, I did not hate this film. It wasn't, I don't personally now put it in the zeitgeist of Mean Streets and things like that, even though it's, definitely, in that neighborhood. I don't put it on a pedestal for myself. Like people do who saw it closer to when it came out or saw it when they were super impressionable about something, which makes me sad because it just tells me I'm at a certain point in my life where I rationalize more than go into imagination. But I did find that it made me remember what I love about film and television from this particular time. Growing up, I had a pretty rough childhood. Now, keep in mind, I was born only 2 years after this movie was made, came out, etc. But my family was so not on the wealthy side, and I had a lot of family. So there was something about the poverty of New York at that time and how I related to it when I was growing up, watching films to escape from my own realities. That's actually another reason why I'm a performer and actor, is because film helped me escape the things I was trying not to think of when I was very young. And I don't know why I was so impressionable at the ages of 4 or 5 or anything like that, but I really was. Those were some formative, weird, and hard times on me as a young kid. A lot of things went on for me at that time frame between 4 and 8 years old. And so watching this film, thinking about just the environment that they were in. And the thing about movies then is we really do. One thing I had to tell myself as I was watching this the second time is that we're dropping in on someone's life. And they used to do that a lot more with film, is you would like Cool Hand Luke. You drop in on Cool Hand Luke when this pivotal thing goes on. But when you leave that movie, you don't feel complete.
Yeah.
You know, like, and when I left Travis Bickle, and when I was leaving that cab where Betsy Sybil Shepherd was in at the very end of the film, I thought, wow, this really is a great film of that era of just coming in, showing us these moments that could very well be pivotal in this person's life and should be for storytelling purposes, and then leaving without absolute resolution. Because when we leave the theater, we don't have absolute resolution. So that was my feeling. That's why I watched it twice, is I really wanted to escape into it and put myself back to when I watched the movies out of necessity for my own life.
It's interesting you touched on something that I always find, and especially doing this podcast, that I always find so interesting, which is like when you see a movie really does, you are more formative in certain time periods and in certain ages than you are in others. And I think part of it is just that you are more informative. Your brain is getting stuff kind of for the first time. And I think this is, a movie that in 1976 was, people weren't making movies about the Vietnam War, really. Like, that hadn't happened. And so it's one of those things where you're like, Psycho doesn't hit the same if you see it when you're 40. But like, that's because everyone else you've seen the Vietnam veteran down on his luck. You've seen all of these things done in other movies subsequent to this. And like, you have to remember that this movie hit a lot of that stuff first and, to some degree best. But yeah, I mean, like, you've already probably seen Born on the 4th of July. You've probably already seen Deer Hunter. You've probably already seen a bunch of movies like that. And so it's never going to hit you with the same wallop that it would have if you'd have seen this first in like that time period. But it is kind of funny how that happens. I always, apropos of nothing, it always reminds me of how Black Christmas doesn't get enough credit for really being kind of the first big slasher movie, because everyone just saw Halloween and assumed they did it all first. They didn't, but for everyone saw it first there. And so it kind of gets left by the wayside. And not that we need to go off on a Black Christmas tangent, but it is when you see a movie and what state you're in, even from a week to week thing. Like there's times where I'll see a movie in the theater and be like, it was just all right. And then I see it again on, at home in like a different mindset. And I'm like, wow, that movie was awesome. What did I miss the first time around? So it is weird how that happens.
I would tell you, I think I mentioned this in the time before time when we started this interview, that I had auditioned a couple times for Killers of the Flower Moon. Mm-hmm. And having watched the movies that I did to get myself in a mind frame to understand what Scorsese might ask of me, made the movies I watched of his just before then feel like the first time I was watching them, because I had a different set of motivation in life. It was the same with working with with Coppola, rewatching Apocalypse Now, and I have a different feeling. So I've got this feeling of, oh my God, I'm going to be in a room with this guy, and he's going to share his art with us. And he thinks I fit, and we're going to see what the world is together. That's one of the things I love about the business that I'm in, is I get to relearn. That's why, I watched it twice, is because I had to really reboot and be excited about what we were doing today, talking about it. So then it gave me a different POV the second time that I watched it, because I got to tell you, when I was younger, I think there were attempts to watch this film, but without knowing the actual plot of the movie, knowing that there was going to be this dynamic between Jodie Foster and his character, I was really messed up by that. And I don't think I wanted to watch that. So then having watched it a second time and erased all that negativity from myself, I was like, oh, okay, wow, what a cool piece. And, so I started to look at it more as like what somebody would look at their first viewing of it. I had to digress my thought pattern, like we're talking about, just being back then, being in that pivotal moment. I had to recreate that pivotal moment based on the excitement of this interview and the direction of the people that made the project.
Do you think that if you had watched this movie, you would have booked Killers of the Flower Moon?
No. I think a lot of wonderful people went out for Killers of the Flower Moon, but I would tell you, I think nothing would have changed. But
well, to be fair, Lily Gladstone nailed that role, so you can't be too mad.
No. But what it is you know what it is it's like, I don't think anything would have been different on that project, but just the sheer excitement of watching what films I did watch beforehand and reading the book. There's a different energy that comes into watching something that is more pure or as close to being on the nose and pure as the first time the movie came out in the era that the movie came out. So there's a longing where I don't know as most people do, but as a performer, I try to set the setting of where I'm at. You know, I can see everything in the room, or I can see everything in the open area that I'm at in a scene in my mind. And when I watch a movie like this, it's, you know, as they're going through Bickle's apartment, and, you know, he's like eating a bowl of chopped up pancakes, and he's got the syrup, but he's got Domino sugar, and he's just pouring sugar and everything. Like, it's just kind of his thing. I can kind of see what the rest of the room looks like. So I'm not surprised when I see the TV on the like crate, you know, towards the end when he's like pushing it with his foot, and when he's thinking about what he wants to do and how he wants to become a member of his society. It's just really kind of neat to see that. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
Something you said actually in the intro piece was you as an actor, the way filmmakers approach stuff and look sometimes for the cinematography or some of the magic tricks. You were actually mentioning how you would look at De Niro's choices and what you would do in that spot. Watching it twice back in the interim here, how do you feel about his performance? I know you said you've not seen Raging Bull, but do you understand like why this is lauded as one of the great, you know, performances of all time? And do you like the choices he made? Where do you think he would have veered?
Me, I'm too big. I'm more, I have to bring myself down just to be at everyone else's peak. You know, I don't know if I think I'm walking in my own TV world. I think I always pretend that the world is my sitcom and there's an live audience no matter what, and which is something I'm trying to deprogram myself as I get into my second half of life. But I'm trying to think is like, if I were to walk through this scenario with him and the thought process, I think he made brilliant choices. And that was the thing that I think that kind of threw me off, because he's more like a PTSD version of the character he played in Mean Streets.
Yeah, I could see that. I love how quiet he was in the first half of the movie before he really flips the switch. Yeah. You could tell he's alone and kind of a weird loner, but he's very reserved, and and he really kind of in the second half loses that and kind of thinks he's fallen into who he really is. I was having this conversation. Do you remember? You guys remember the Jerky Boys? Yeah, of course.
Yes.
So I'm friends with Kamal Ahmed.
That surprises me not at all.
Right. I love that guy. We met during the pandemic. In fact, I did his show Crash the System. This is like a Tubi thing or something like that. I think it's Apple Plus or something. One of those. And he and I were getting into a discussion. He's like, so tell me, what do you think of it? And we had kind of like a pregame of what we're talking about now. And I told him, I think what I got out of it is and based on the conversation he has with the fella in the taxi cab hiring joint, where he's like, you're gonna bust my balls, you know? And he's like, what kind of education you got? Because he's grilling him. He's like, you got your chauffeur license? And he's like, yeah. He's like, physical's good. He's like, I can be wherever you want me to be. And the guy who's hiring him is just kind of like, okay, you gonna answer all this? And he goes, what's your education? And he's like, I've had some, bit. And then the guy realizes, and he leans back and he looks up at De Niro, Travis, and he's like, yeah, you served? And he's like, yeah, he's like, Army? He's like, no, it's Marines. And he's like, oh, I was in the Marines too. I get it. And so he kind of figures out Travis right away. Travis wears the fact that he has PTSD on his face. And, you see that because he's scarred. When he's doing that push-up scene, you see his whole back is scarred. It's got to be from an explosive, because that's not De Niro's real back, So Scorsese has given you all these things to tell you, but not force you into being the particular kind of PTSD he has. But anybody that served or anybody that has combat PTSD, anybody who has that darkness about them that they can't quite overcome, he really addressed it in this film without making people feel excluded. So I will say, in answer to an earlier question from you, Shawn, is he was able to do something I've not seen Born on the 4th of July do, or, these other traumatizing movies, where somebody's really been through the muck. In this case, this is a guy trying to figure out how to get out of the muck but not making a big meal of why he's there in that, why he's up all night taking bus rides and, you know, going from shore to shore. And he's like, I might as well become a cabbie, right? You know, make some money.
Well, I kind of wonder, it almost hits on PTSD before. I mean, look, I don't pretend to know a ton about PTSD, although I know a little bit because we did Red Camera Obscura, which deals in PTSD, but like, I don't know the history of PTSD and I don't know who was talking about it in the 70s, but it does almost feel like it's taking on PTSD before people knew what PTSD was. So in that way, it's very kind of early to the party. In
like way early to the party.
Yeah.
You know, Angus, we did in the movie Angus, we dealt with bullying.
Hold for applause. Angus.
We dealt with bullying and gay parents. Mm-hmm. And it was still so heavy of a concept at the time in 1994, 95 that they cut it out of the film, you know, the gay parent stuff and, you know, just dealt with the bullying. But watching this in retrospect and definitely after the, you know, second and first viewing, I both viewings, I was like, I kind of get the story of this dude and what's going on with him, you know? So I was in that way. Yeah, this is a revolutionary project and I'm pretty jazzed that I saw it. Now, even thinking about that moment, even as I'm discovering it right now in this conversation with you live, this lives now a little bit more in my zeitgeist because it is a first. And you're right. And that's the thing is try to get yourself there where it's a first for you and it's a great thing. Yeah, I do have to put it up there on a higher shelf now. I don't know if I'm going to put it directly at the top, but it's definitely going to go on a higher shelf.
Yeah, the PTSD of it all. Well, Cameron, to your point, that's been called everything from nostalgia to shell shock over depends on the war. It wasn't always the term PTSD, but there's always been some version of it written about.
I knew shell shock
all the way back to the Civil War. You know, they called it nostalgia, I believe. But yeah, shell shock in the World Wars and stuff. You know, we mentioned Coppola as Charlie Talbert, now seen in Megalopolis. Go find it. Check your local listings. But yeah, Coppola's Apocalypse Now was like the first movie that really tackled and depicted Vietnam in a film. It took a few years because, you know, the war did loom large, but I always kind of go back to, you know, this movie is prescient, you know, more each passing decade because of the lack of care we show veterans when they come home. They're a little rudderless, you know, and Travis is certainly that guy. And whether Scorsese knew he was commenting on that fully or not at the time because it was still so new, like it hasn't really gone away. So I think that's what makes this movie, unfortunately, feel a little timeless in a way.
Well, and speaking about things that were prescient about this movie, so around the same time this was being made, David Berkowitz, the Son of Sam killer, was kind of just getting started. He'd stabbed a couple people, but he was just kind of just getting started. And he and Travis Bickle have some really uncanny connections that were not really planned and just kind of happened, but they were both disturbed former soldiers. They both felt New York City was like a cesspool of degeneracy. They were both insomniacs. They both used 44 caliber pistols. And Berkowitz actually was a cab driver for a little while before he became a postal worker. So it's unclear if, you know, if any of this movie had anything to do with Berkowitz. No one said anything about it. Like Paul Schrader and Scorsese haven't said anything about it. And it's never been confirmed that Berkowitz ever saw Taxi Driver. But there's a lot of really weird connections to Travis Bickle and the Son of Sam killer.
Yeah, that's the other thing I thought about is like, you know, I did think of the Son of Sam. I actually thought of Zodiac, but you were right. Son of Sam, I was thinking incorrectly. I knew, and I was thinking about that Berkowitz time during this. And I remember learning and growing up about the trash strikes and all that stuff. So there's another thing about this film that's a very great positive for me. It's like you can smell every bit of New York in every frame of this film. And whether it related to Berkowitz or not, they're still coming out of a dark time, and it's not just Berkowitz. There's a lot of crazy going on in the
it was a very strange time in New York City's history at that point. And also, Spike Lee's Summer of Sam is a really good companion piece to this. If you've never seen it, that takes on obviously the Son of Sam. It takes on the trash strike and all that. It's very much in the exact same time period that this movie finds itself in. So if you find yourself nostalgic for that, like late 70s, that movie takes place in 1977 and is very much feels like it's in the same world.
Thinking about the same world, you know, even with the speed of talk and the way they spoke, like Albert Brooks, who plays is Tim or Todd, basically the guy that's Tom. And he's now in the film. I couldn't tell if he was homosexual or if they just had a work relationship, or if he was hitting on her and she wasn't receptive.
That was my take. My take was that he was hitting on her, but Shawn, I don't know if you got the same thing.
Yeah, that was how I took it as well.
Right. But, he never puts the amount of effort, like you never, it's not, for me, what the problem with the Albert Brooks scenes and actually a little bit of the Sybil Shepherd Betsy stuff, it felt a little underdeveloped for me.
I can see that.
But then I had to realize when we are where we are, think about a movie and I had to compare it with the conversation of how people were talking at the time. But this is getting back to the point of how people were talking. You think about the 20s and it's a higher pitched thing, and they had radios where you had to talk like this, so your voice would reverberate. And then if you listen to Albert and you listen to Betsy's dialogue, it's kind of a slowed down version of it. It's very just witty, back and forth, single-minded. There's the scene where Betsy looks out and she sees the taxi cab, and they're literally in the middle of a conversation. Albert Brooks and Tom and Betsy are in the middle of a conversation. She's like, "Have you seen that cab?" And he's like, "What? What are you talking about?" And he's still talking to her, and she's been kind of ignoring him because she's curious about the cab. And he says, "I love you." He says, "I love you," and he's just doing it to point out the fact that she's not paying attention to him. And then she's like, "Did you see that cabbie out there?" And he's like, what cabbie? What are you talking about? Now he's not in her world. And she's like, "That cabbie out there." And he's like, yeah. He's like, "Get your glasses." He's like, and he's still wearing his glasses. And he just, and the delivery is brilliant. He just looks forward and he's like, "Okay, I'm getting them right now. Okay, they're on." Oh, there he is. And he doesn't move. His whole Albert Brooks comedic genius in that scene is brilliant.
Yeah, and I think they had a really tough thing to do here because they're not in the interesting part of the movie. They're in the part that has to happen so the interesting part can happen. They're in kind of the mechanics of the story. And so they don't get a lot of the showier things to do. It's almost like he was relying on them. They're almost like they're of a different movie. They're almost like an Albert Brooks movie happening in contrast to a Travis Bickle movie. You know what I mean? And
exactly.
He gets pulled into that world once and is like, "I'm out." Immediately, he takes her to that, which is so funny that he has no idea he's done anything wrong. He takes her to that X-rated movie, and she's that's the only time she crosses over kind of into his world, and immediately is like, "Oh, you and I are not the same thing. We don't live in the same world." And so I think they're there to kind of show what the kind of real world is like that he can never survive in. You know what I mean? He's not built for their world, and that. So I think they're doing a lot of the heavy lifting behind the scenes, so Travis Bickle can do the things he does. They're in the less exciting version of the movie.
Right. Yeah, when they go to see Sometimes Sweet Susan at the theater. And she's like, I don't want to go in there. And it's it's exotic couples. And she still goes in there. Yeah. Why did you go in there? What is, that scene was very heavy for me in the fact, and you're right, it is two movies converging, and he does that brilliantly. I wanted to see more of that dynamic, but more of that dynamic just because I'm used to films that wrap themselves up, in several ways. So you're right. You bring up a brilliant point again. So you're opening the
2024 version of this movie beats you over the head with that. Here, Scorsese, and I think there's a really subtle thing at play where I think she's toying with him in the same way that she's toying with Tom.
Right.
And he goes, in that scene goes, "Oh, these are not the same kind of people. This is not a guy to toy with. This is not fun anymore." Because I don't think my take on the movie is that she was never going to get with Travis Bickle. She was playing with him. She was toying with him. She's a pretty girl. She can have anybody. Tom's fawning over her all the time. She's just kind of on a goof. And I think when that scene happened, I think she kind of correctly realized, "Oh, this guy's into some shit that doesn't end well. I need to get out of this post haste. I need to be done with this guy." And ultimately, she's right. She's right in that regard, which makes the ending interesting. And we can talk about that now, or we can talk about that later. But the very end of the movie, which I would love to touch on at some point, is where she comes back. I think
we're going to talk about that. Yeah.
Okay. Shawn, do we want to get that now, or do we want to stay on
after? Well, after there's still some stuff to run through. To both of you guys' point, Charlie having the experience of being a 40-something-year-old guy that comes to this movie, and you mentioning the 2024 goggles, it is funny how we can't not have that baggage a little bit, because to a similar point, my memory of this movie was that Jodie Foster came in way sooner.
Same,
and I thought she was in more of this
quite
thing. But like in the 2024 version is he passes by her at minute 15, right? Like that happens, what, an hour into this movie almost? But yeah, I think we have a little bit of baggage.
He doesn't say a word to her until after the hour.
Yeah.
But I do want to address what you were just talking about, Cam, is when it's doing that overpan shot and he's trying to figure out his life and he's just laying in his bed and he says, I don't believe people should devote themselves and the fact that it's morbid to have that self-attention. Mm-hmm. And he says, one should become a person like other people.
Yeah.
Right. That's his dialogue. He says one should become a person like other people because he's trying to figure out, how do I fit into this world? What do I do to make this world bearable for me? Now, this is a broad spectrum conversation in the respect that I think this kind of sums up the movie in a way. Mm-hmm. And we're not done with it. I just want to kind of talk about my overall impression of this movie. I was trying to make sense of it as an artist would filming it. So I was trying to put myself in the mind of Marty. And it was literally just, I realized that the guy comes out, doesn't know what to do with his time. He's stressed out about everything. He hasn't figured out any direction for his life. What has he been doing? Okay. Military's taught him he's got to do something with his skills. Boom. Now he's a cab driver, right? Now he's seeing relationships. He's like, okay, this is kind of what everybody's doing. Then he fixates on one girl and he's like, oh, okay, I got to have this girl because she's beautiful in my mind. And that's what we do. This is what normal people do. They go out, they find a beautiful wife. And I say that for that time in that mind frame, their partner, etc., but beautiful wife. And they live that life. But that beautiful soon-to-be wife is now dedicated to another man, which is Palantine, the guy that she's working for. And she's got this guy, Tom, that's always on her. And those two things need to go away. Those two things don't work for me. I have to tell her that. He does tell her that. And he's just like, I can't. He's like, you're in the wrong place. And she says that thing about the record, the Chris Christopherson. She's like, you're a total, prophet and pusher. He's like, well, maybe not that part, but you're definitely contradictory. So then he takes her to the movie, and this doesn't go well because his demented mind thinks, okay, this is normal. Couples go to this all the time, which you never see couples in there. That fails him. So then he goes, well, I now need to get rid of the thing that's distracting her. So if I get rid of Palantine, I then have her. Because you remember, he meets Palantine in his taxi cab and he's like, oh, I have people vote for you all the time. He's like trying to kiss his ass a little bit. And he says, you need to clean up this town. He has nothing wrong. And Palantine says nothing contradictory the next time we see him on that skit where he's talking in front of on a news channel. Doesn't say anything contradictory to what he had a conversation with Bickle. So nothing would have tweaked him to go off on Palantine except for this is Betsy's only motivation right now. She's trying to get this dude elected. And if he doesn't exist, that job doesn't exist. And maybe she's free to pick up the phone.
Well, and you're hitting on something very pressing because that was a thing that, the first couple times I saw this movie, I was younger and dumber, obviously. And I struggled with that. I was like, why is this guy, Travis is on this guy's team. Why is he trying to take this guy out? It's not like he turned on him. It's not like the guy said one thing in his cab and did something different. And again, I think the 2024 version of this is he's nice to him in the cab and then he's a piece of shit behind the scenes. But no, Palantine is by all accounts a good man the whole movie. And it took me a couple viewings to realize what you're saying, which is that the only thing the guy did was be something in his way and keeping him from getting the girl, which is funny because you hit the nail on the head. I don't think the only thing drawing him to this girl is that she happened to be in his eye line, I think. I don't think he loves her any more than he loves anyone else. I think, like you said, he's just going through the motions of doing what he thinks people are supposed to do. And he just glommed onto her because he pulled up his taxi and she was in the window. And but yeah, it took me a few viewings to be able to kind of decipher. I always thought the Palantine thing was a weird non sequitur, but I do definitely, in more recent viewings as an adult, I see what you're saying. But yeah, it is. He's just trying to be human and failing.
Shawn, your thoughts?
I very much agree. I'm glad that you were able to open Cameron's eyes. / he got them open this week as he watched the movie for the first time as a grown man. Not as
No,
I'm kidding. No, I very much this is
viewing, but it is a thing that I struggled with the first couple times I saw.
No, and again, with the maturity of a Charles Talbert, watching it at his older age and dissecting it this way. No, I very much agree with the sentiment because he does kind of say it outright when he's like, "This is what we do. We go to movies. Guys take girls to movies." And she's like, "Not this kind of movie." He's like, that's how like streamlined his binary thinking is. It's like, no, I'm doing the thing. To you guys' point, like this is what society says you're supposed to do. You do this, then you do this, then you get the dog and the plant and the wife and the house. Like there's an order to it all, and I'm just going to try to follow it and fail miserably, unfortunately.
Well, I think I would argue, not to get too far down the rabbit hole here, but I would argue that that's still a way of thinking that even in 2024, people are stuck in. I think less and less with every growing year, but I think people are still brainwashed into got to go to college, got to find a husband, got to have kids, got to have a picket fence, got to go to church on Sundays. Like, you don't got to do any of that stuff.
We are three men who all have a friend who never should have gotten married that we know. And you're like, why did you do this? And I'm sure
he's certainly not on this podcast.
Yeah, one of you might be the friend of that group. But you know what I'm getting at. Like, there's always that guy that was like, couldn't keep it in his pants, has no loyalty. Like, what are you doing getting married? It's like, well, that's what society tells me I'm supposed to do. Or that's what my culture, religion, parents
can't break up with a girlfriend until he's got another one lined up.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. Unlike Charlie and I, who at some point will be living in a Golden Girls man house with 4 70-year-old dudes just living the dream.
I forfeited relationships when I moved down here to Louisiana. I didn't want to. I'd been in a few relationships that have been here, but I didn't want to focus on that. I just wanted to focus on film, but I didn't want to end up living here because my goal has always been to live in New York. This has been wonderful here, and it's afforded me a lot of things, but it's not where I wanted to be. So I was married at one point, and I did step away.
I did not know that you were married, Charlie. I'm learning such things.
But I did Travis Bickle. I was like, okay, so I got to quit acting, and that's why I quit for 6 years.
You didn't pull a Scorsese and murder her in a window, did you?
No.
So here's
I'll see you later.
Charlie's on the move. So fun fact about that, Scorsese was not supposed to be in that scene. The actor who was supposed to be in that scene injured himself the day before on a different film set, and Scorsese stepped into one of the probably more memorable roles in the film. And actually, Scorsese, to his credit, is a pretty decent actor.
I want to monologue that scene.
Yeah, he always has been very good in the few little snippets he's done. Did you catch him in the cameo? Because initially he just filmed himself as a cameo sitting on the wall as the girl walks by early in the movie with his full beard.
There you go. There's a picture of me and my wife.
See, for those of you just listening, which is everyone but Shawn and I, Charlie proved that he was once married.
Yes. Charlie, on this audio podcast, has done space work. He literally walked off frame a minute ago when he did that bit, and now he's showing us photos on this audio podcast.
He did. And really, you guys are not getting the full picture, is the thing.
Everybody at home, do you see what I'm talking about?
Such an actor.
Yes, I did see him in the cameo of the slow motion scene at the
Yeah, so I had questions about that. My brain was just like, it blew up. So the cameo must have been filmed before he had to do the
I assume so.
Yeah, because I was just like, there's no way he would have double dropped himself in there. And he's staring at her the entire time. So it's like, are we supposed to be seeing this from Scorsese's eyes? Like,
maybe she's his wife. Did we ever think about that?
Well, my brain locked into the fact that, yeah, I knew he had to fill in for an actor. So I realized that they must have shot the cameo first. And then we're like, son of a bitch, I got to do the scene.
He stepped in. He stepped in like a true boss.
For years late. But, it reminded me of, I finally understood the eye of, like Megalopolis. It's literally as if we were looking through the brain, through the eyes of Francis and his reflection of our own society. So it was kind of neat to see Marty sitting there and watching the person that's being narrated about, because it also lent to the fact that this is some version of Marty. And he's kind of saying that. And I could be reading into it too much, but I thought, oh, that's really neat. It's like saying this body of work is a part of me. So I thought that was really neat.
Yeah. We have 50 years almost distance to say that maybe he didn't realize that at the time either. But yeah, he's always been, showing a lens on violence, and a lot of his critiques have been, well, you're not scolding it. American movies, you got to say, wag your hand at bad things and bad behavior, drugs, violence, and he doesn't always do that.
That kind of goes to the whole Cannes premiere of it all, where this movie landed with a bit of a thud at Cannes, and while it did ultimately win the Palme d'Or, there was a lot of booing both in the screening and at the awards. The Europeans feel about violence the way that the Americans feel about sexuality. So we went through a similar thing with Pulp Fiction, where some people were upset when that played at Cannes and won some awards. And specifically, the head of the jury, Tennessee Williams, known for his intense violence, said, "Watching violence on the screen is a brutalizing experience for the spectator. Films should not take a voluptuous pleasure in spilling blood and then lingering on terrible cruelties as if this was at a Roman circus." So obviously Tennessee Williams was of a different era and wrote very different things, but needless to say, it was a bit of a mixed can for the good folks at Taxi Driver.
One smidge of context I will give, though, was that there was a legit terrorist threat, a legit bomb threat the year before at the festival. So I think people might have been a smidge on edge about it. And again, the turmoil of not just Vietnam was not just an American thing. That was a worldwide story that caused a lot of strife. And yeah, there may have been a bit of hesitance to have something so violent being addressed while it was still such a large looming thing, especially in American society.
Well, I will say America didn't handle it too much better, as the original film was given an X rating. And in order to get an R rating, they had to go in and desaturate the color of the blood to make it look less real and more cartoonish, which I think is really funny because, in my opinion, this has some of the best fake blood in the history of film. So I don't know what they. I guess they made it redder and less
I didn't
brown.
know that. It looked pretty legit.
But I think the blood looks fucking fantastic in this movie. So thank you to the Motion Picture Ratings Board. It's the first time I've ever said that, but you gave us cool looking blood, so I appreciate that.
Hold on, I'm just writing a quick note here. Cameron has said mixed can instead of mixed bag. That is his one for 2025. There we go.
Wait, did I say mixed can?
Yeah, you did.
Let's go in there and
he had the film fest on his mind, I guess.
Here's the sound. Mixed bag. All right, now you can use that to go put that over top of what I said.
No, mixed can works so beautifully.
While you're doing rereads, call back to the Titanic episode. Will you please say in a clear voice, "I feel bad for those submersible folks"?
I will say nothing of the sort.
Okay.
I stand by what I say.
I don't have time to go edit that anyway.
I'm unaware of the conversation they're speaking of. So
plausible deniability, Charlie. Plausible deniability.
First thing out of Charlie's mouth on the first call. Hey Cam, I listened to the Titanic one. That was wild.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Yes. At some point, I'm going to lose Guardians of the Galaxy 7 over that quote. But today is not that day. Can we talk about the ending of the movie? I want to talk about the ending.
You want to come back to this, so go ahead. Tell us.
I do. It's a very divisive ending. A lot of people have a lot of different opinions on the ending. Charlie, walk me through your opinion on the ending.
I can't talk to you about the ending yet.
Okay, well, when's good for you?
Because we haven't even got to Jodie Foster yet, man.
Okay, well, let's talk. We can talk about the other stuff.
Yeah, let's hit the cast. We've talked about De Niro a bit, but let's run through them real quick.
Do it. Let's run through the cast.
We'll end on Jodie, as she is the junior of the group. Amazing top build lineup here. De Niro, Jodie Foster, Albert Brooks, Sybil Shepherd, Harvey Keitel, Peter Boyle. That is a murderer's row of a lineup. De Niro, this was his third collaboration with Scorsese. I know Charlie mentioned seeing Mean Streets before. He did New York also ahead of this, and then as of this moment, they are 10 feature films and counting together. He becomes a friend of the show. Cameron, we'll talk about that later. He might be the first ever three-peat on our show.
He is I believe he is the first ever three-peat friend of the show in Raging Bull and Heat, and now in Taxi Driver. So he's been in 3 of the, 15 or so movies we've done on this show. So he's doing all right for himself.
So let's talk a little bit about Jodie Foster. This is the reason Jodie, this dynamic that I kind of remember seeing in passing or hearing about in passing or just not quite understanding. It was one of my deterrents for watching this film. Mm-hmm. It was one of those things where I was like, I don't really want to see that. It's just, I don't know if it was the time I grew up in, the place, whatever was going on in our worlds, at whatever age that people were trying to make me watch this film for the first time. There was something that didn't work for me. And having, wanting to do this show with you guys and being invited to do it, I was like, okay, I can do this. And it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. But this continues on that topic, what I was talking about, like where his transformation to think, get rid of Palatine, etc. But then something goes where that's not going to be a reality. Palatine is not going to be reality because he doesn't get a chance to pull his weapon and take him out. And he came close to it. He survived whatever battles he'd been in. And then he survived this choice, of trying to kill Palatine. And he goes, well, there's got to be something I can do to redeem myself or to put myself in the mindset and become one of these people, like I said I would in the film. And he decides to save this 12-and-a-half-year-old prostitute.
Ugh.
Oh my God. Yeah. What a different time. 12 and a half. Not that it doesn't happen now, but you know what I mean? Like at this point, that time in the US, just gross. And he decides, I'm going to save her, so you see this young girl who's completely programmed by Keitel's character, who, by the way, that's a brilliant scene where he's holding her head and he's like telling her sweet nothings, but he's training her every turn of that dance. And he's just like,
well, and we've seen the lesser version of that scene so many times in other things. Oh, come on, baby. I need you, baby. But like, this is like God tier version of that scene. Like what he's doing, you can feel the programming happening in real time. And yeah, it's wonderfully acted by both people and really, really well written. But yeah, that scene is one of the more well done scenes in the movie in the way that comes together. You really felt it. I think it was a really interesting choice to make Jodie Foster's character Iris not really be looking to get out. You know what I mean? Which I think They did it really well where like you could see how he got there because of their first interaction in the car. But like then when he actually meets her, it goes nothing like he thinks it's going to go, which is interesting.
Right. And that's the thing is like nothing goes the way he thinks it's going to go. No. And, that leads up to that iconic scene just before this scene, before he goes to Palatine to take the shot. He's like, you talking to me? I mean, you must be talking to me, because
I've heard of this scene.
You're familiar. So he's like looking in front of the mirror, right? He's got this gut. No, I'm just kidding. So, and that's the scene, right? But he's talking, it's basically during that time in the movie, he's laying out his manifesto about what's to be and what it's going to be. He's writing the letter home, to his mom and dad and all that stuff. And then we get to that where she is not like, I'm fine. I'm doing fine. Let me just, do my job here and you can, it'll be fine. But he does have an innocence to him, which I think De Niro did very well, very beautifully, was he has this innocence because he's earnestly just trying to be a human being. And I think that, and this will lead to your ending that you want to get into, I think that it's very recognizable on his face. And those women in this film, whether it be Jodie, they do see that there is an earnestness there. It's done incorrectly as far as our moral standards are and our codes are, but it's very visible because she wouldn't go to a private place with a guy, and lead him on to a place where she could be killed. You know what I mean? There's an open door and he misses it, but he decides with this one, with the little one, with Jodie's character, Iris, that he's not going to miss this. No matter what, end all be all, he's going to correct this problem. And then he ends up accidentally becoming a member of society by, quote unquote, saving this character in this, what was a gorgeously bloody scene. Yeah, but they missed the bar on trying to make that not as gory as possible. It was great. And so I really like how they closed it off with the Keitel character. I can't remember if the guy's name was Storm or what it was, but
she called him Sport.
They really closed the door on that and really kind of solidified making us feel good about the dynamic of the relationship that they had, especially with the parents' letter about how she's doing good now and she's back in school. And, so I thought this was fantastic. And the storytelling of all of that really was something that does put it higher on the shelf as far as film goes. So Marty really locked it down with that.
Yeah, and I love the just the matter of factness of the violence. Like, you're not getting people being blown through walls. You're not getting John Wick. He gets shot in the neck, and it takes you a second to even realize what happened because it's so matter of fact. You're like, wait, he gets stung by a bee? What's happening? And then you're like, oh, he's got a hole in his neck. And so, like, yeah, that whole scene is just very visceral in a way that, like, a lot of violence, even really well. I mean, we're living in a time where violence on screen is done almost like ballet. And it's amazing. Like, the John Wick's movies like that are great. But like you feel this violence. Like, this violence is like the rest of the movie. This is dirty. Like, this is a guy getting shot multiple times trying to do this. Like, nothing goes exactly as planned. He shoots the guy's hand off. Like, everything is just, it feels like a dude just rolling in and shooting some people. Like, how it would actually happen. Like, there's none of that stuff that he's been practicing, none of that like suave draws, none of that. It's just like,
yeah, nothing
violence personified. But then, so the $1 million question that seems to divide people is, after the police show up and he leans his head back, do you believe everything after that actually happened?
Yes.
So there's a lot of people, myself included, who thinks that may be a dying fever dream. Because it feels, I don't know, there's some stuff with it that feels kind of
that's interesting.
out of place otherwise. And he puts his head back and possibly dies. And then suddenly you get, oh, look what a hero this guy is. Thank you for saving my daughter. You get the girl. Like, all of that feels very much like what Travis wants and not necessarily what Travis is going to get. And now Scorsese has come out and said that's not the case. He says that he believes it's real. And he made the movie. So, who are we to argue with him? But my take has always been that it feels very much like the fever dream of what Travis has been trying and failing to do. I don't know where everyone else stands on that, but and there are things that people on the internet cling to for this. Like, the streets in that taxi ride are not full of trash in the same way as the other scenes. Now, that could, like we said, that's part of, it could be part of when it was shot, as because all that trash was real. But also, like, she's very much glowing, wind blowing like an angel in that last scene. Like, so there's a lot of stuff that leads me to lean that way. I always felt like it was kind of a fever dream, but I'm definitely curious to hear what everyone else thinks.
I will give Charlie the floor here in just a moment, but I have to say, maybe it's because I haven't seen this movie but a few times in life, and it's been 15 plus years. I didn't know that was a big theory on this one, much in the way that Breaking Bad had that similar thing where it seemed wrapped up a little too well for what Walter was hoping, and they thought Vince Gilligan came out and said, no, it's a good theory, but this is all real as I wrote it. So knowing Scorsese did the same thing, I somehow had missed this as a big online fan theory, which most of those, like I said, with you, Cameron, offline, I usually hate fan theories because they do cling to one solitary thing that, like, if you negate these other three things, this one thing is why
the movie is so, and the reason I always thought this before I knew it was like a debate, like, it's just what I thought, but like, the movie is so dark and his path is so dark and flawed, and like, it just feels like it ends so happy for a guy that didn't really earn that. And didn't, like, it feels almost like a studio ending.
Well, hold on, though. Well,
we know it is not.
Have you seen the movie Scare Package? A lot of horror movies end with daylight and sunlight because it's a little bit of hope after a lot of darkness.
I've never heard of it.
In a similar vein, that's sort of, I would argue, the commentary he's going for is that it might have satiated him for a moment and he's fine again for a moment till the next thing. Like, I don't think it's wrapped up in a bow. I know you mean that it's like somehow cleaner and a little idealized for a minute, but I think he's still on the edge and he's still on the fringe and he's still like one, blow off or blow up away from doing this all over again. So I don't know if I've never thought about this because I didn't know it was a big theory, but I didn't take it as that watching it, but hearing it now, I can see the argument.
Yeah. And I love that it could go either way. I don't purport to be correct. It's just how I've always thought of it. And then only later did I kind of figure out that there was a debate here and Scorsese's weighed in and it's a thing, but
I get it. I get why there's a debate. I'm actually looking at the last scene right now. Like, I was like, I wonder what he's wearing.
Are you live watching the movie? This is the first.
I am live watching it, but he's writing on the clipboard and he's wearing his normal clothes and she's got a little bit of like disappointment in herself. So I don't know. I like this theory. It's not crazy and it's not unheard of. But that's the thing about art, man, is when you look at art, you decide what you see, and that's what makes a movie to me.
That's what I love. I love that you and I and Shawn can be three smart, learned filmgoers who could walk out of a movie and be like, this is what I think happened. No, this is what I think happened. No, this is what I think happened.
Yeah, we could be. We could be smart and learned, but we're not. And we have the same.
That's right. That is a tribute to Mr. Scorsese. Even the dum-dums get something.
We get it. We like it a movie.
It's funny. I pulled a bit of pieces from different things, and there's a review I even found via Filmtonomy from Bianca Garner where she says something that's kind of plays to the point of his deranged hero complex can be read as America's need to be seen as its global superpower fighting against the evils of the world. But like Bickle, it can be argued that the mission in Vietnam was a misguided and result of America's own paranoia. So like it is kind of an ironic thing that he becomes the hero because there was no good intention. You know, like in his head he might have thought so, but I do think still that it's an irony of sorts that he becomes the folk hero.
Yeah, and I like that.
He does admit to it in the text of the conversation about, you know, it's like, you know, he gets he's not purposely a hero, but he has found a place. But, you know, life, that's what I was going to say is like the ending of this is when we get to that scene with Sybil's character. I've had one of these moments in my life where I did everything wrong at the time, but then something changed for me and my life went a different way in a way. And it was recognized by somebody that I wanted to have recognition from years before. And to get that, it's kind of funny how life comes around. Like life has a full circle. Like I said, I don't think she was not interested in being with Travis. Sure, she might have been playing with him a little bit, but I don't think it was for,
it's funny how our reads on that scene, on that dynamic, ultimately took us to two different places at the end.
Right.
Where your read is that like she liked him and he fucked up this one thing, but now he's a hero and maybe I didn't give him a real chance. My read was she wasn't really into him and she saw kind of the danger in him and pieced out. And now he's just kind of playing back the greatest hits of what he wished had happened. But it's interesting how our different takes on something that happened in minute 30 kind of got us to a different place at the end. And that's what makes great filmmaking, right? Like that's
right.
That's why this movie is an all-timer and a classic, even if it doesn't quite get up to Mean Streets on the Charlie Talbert meter, but.
Well, I would tell you, having watched it now, yeah, in fact, actually, speak of Mean Streets, the guy that's in the pool hall, the ones is like, who says the line about the mook.
Yeah.
That guy is who was originally supposed to be in the back of the cab.
Yeah, and there are a lot of if you watch Mean Streets or look at the cast, there's a lot of crossover between the guys who are in Mean Streets and the guys who are in this movie in the secondary roles.
I would say that this film goes on the same shelf as Apocalypse Now and Mean Streets. For me, I'm going to have to say because of where I watched it, it's not in my top 10, but I might put it in my top 20.
Yeah, see, for me, this is a top, and Shawn and I have talked about this a little bit off air, but this and Raging Bull are both top 20 American films or even films of all time. Mean Streets for me is a little further down, although I think Mean Streets is fucking fantastic. I will say, though, in the interest of throwing a little hot take in here at the end, I prefer Deer Hunter to Apocalypse Now. I think both are absolute masterpieces, don't get me wrong. I think Deer Hunter is kind of my go-to Vietnam War movie, and I think that's a top 20 movie of all time. But
you want to know a movie I haven't seen?
Raging Bull and
Deer Hunter.
Oh, Charlie.
So, Cameron, it's interesting you say that because that's another one that I feel is closer to this movie, that it's more about the PTSD. There's definitely war stuff in Deer Hunter, but Apocalypse Now feels like its own animal just because, like I said, it was the first one to truly depict war, in the war.
Yeah, Apocalypse Now, it's like you're there as it's happening. Deer Hunter, it's like you're kind of there both as it's happening and after it's happened. And look, they're both great. I own them both. I think they're both absolute classics made by absolute incredible filmmakers. So, Charlie hairs a little bit. But
we don't need Charlie to rank it necessarily right now. He can sit on it. He can, let it digest for a couple years even. But I will say what we talked about off air. You could argue both Raging Bull and this would crack a top 20 American films. And De Niro might crack twice for both roles as well.
I think that's even less. I think that's less arguable.
Yeah,
I think that's less
performances for sure.
There's an argument that those are 1 and 2 on the greatest performances of all time list.
I don't care what you say. I'm not taking Death to Smoochie out of my top 20.
Well, you know what?
No one's asking you to.
That's a movie. You know what's funny is we were talking about it earlier about when you see stuff and whether you're in the mood or whatever. I saw Death to Smoochie in the theater and I wasn't into it, and I haven't seen it since. And I bet you if I watched it again, I'd really like it because I thought I was going to like it, and it has all the pieces that I thought I was going to like, but I wasn't into it when I saw it. But I do. In honor of Charlie Talbert's birthday, I will try to find time to watch Death to Smoochie and give it another look. There is one more thing I want to talk about. We briefly, and then we will let Charlie go to his surprise party in the other room. We briefly talked about the mirror scene. I'd be remiss if we didn't say that what is arguably the greatest improv line of all time, arguably one of the great scenes of all time, in the script said Travis looks in the mirror. That's all it said. Everything else was De Niro and Scorsese. All that you talking to me stuff, that was all those guys. Pretty incredible.
No, that's beautiful. Yeah. And that just goes to De Niro and them's credit of knowing where Travis is in his life in this moment and how to bring that character to true reflection in front of the audience in the purest form. Because you hear him narrate throughout the film, and that's fantastic. That's a great tool. But to literally catch somebody in a candid moment, they repeated that on like the Truman Show, when Truman's, doing the soap things in the mirror where you're just being whatever the hell it is you need to be that morning to get yourself through that day. And you're just having fun with it, or you're just having a moment with it, whether it's heavy or not. You're pure, you're by yourself in the mirror. You are with yourself. So you are going to be as candid as possible. So him doing that, like, you fucking, you talking to me? When he's doing that, you really get a sense of a character by themselves playing out what they want to be to see if it works on them, because we're a million different people every day, Right. So I thought that was pretty genius. It being an iconic scene is not lost on me.
All of it, yeah. Like you said, the line, the motions, the pulling the gun, all that was just him in the moment. And they kind of were playing. Scorsese's told a story somewhere where he's like, we were literally getting beaten on the door by the producer saying, you're running long, you're out of money, or this and that. And that scene was like, he's like, give me 5 more minutes. That may have kind of grown in lore over the time, but that's how they tell it nowadays, is how much of they just kind of caught lightning in a bottle with that bit. Charlie, before we start some wrap up stuff, though, I want to ask you, does the name John Hinckley Jr. ring a bell to you?
Yeah, we're talking Reagan, right?
Yeah. But do you know the connection to this movie and all with Jodie Foster?
Yeah. So first of all, you have the assassination stuff. You have, but I remember the fact that he might have had like tons of pictures of her and would send her a letter, stalk her and stuff like that. Yeah, and I think it was a big newsworthy thing, right? Now, that was another reason I didn't necessarily want to see this movie at the time, because I knew about the Hinckley story.
Cam, you can elaborate. I know you added that note in the doc as well.
Yeah, so he was her stalker while she was at Yale. He was obsessed with Jodie Foster mostly because of Taxi Driver and her role in Taxi Driver. And in 1981, he attempted to assassinate Ronald Reagan, specifically to impress Jodie Foster. She wasn't impressed.
As one does.
The entire thing kind of comes full circle when you consider that Paul Schrader was kind of partially inspired by Arthur Bremer, who shot George Wallace in 1972. And in Taxi Driver, there's a presidential candidate named Charles Palantine, who is potentially going to be like, there's a lot of weird circular logic here where like art imitating life, imitating art, imitating life, where, because of this movie, Hinckley tried to assassinate Reagan. And this movie exists because Arthur Bremer tried to assassinate George Wallace. And so it's a very weird.
So what you're saying is Hinckley should have watched the movie twice and realized that the two storylines didn't line up.
What I'm saying is we need to find out.
Nothing to do with Iris.
What I'm saying is we need to find out if John Hinckley thinks the ending's real or a fever dream. And I will not rest until we know where Hinckley.
There we go. That's right there. That's the conundrum of this whole. Every movie
will. That'll break it wide open.
Some jamoke is going to listen to this in 10 years and not get the reference. But what Charlie's saying in a very timely bad joke is that Luigi Mangione only watched this movie once. Had he watched it twice, he might not have gone off.
I have no comment on this subject.
No comment. Submersibles.
I'm talking about Hinckley, man. Hinckley should have watched this twice because
I actually had
as should Luigi Mangione.
I was going down a really bad Reagan joke path, but I decided to keep it to myself. And I would say that's progress.
Well, Cam, go ahead and give me a jelly beans worth of bad jokes.
All right. Anyway, let's wrap this up because we have started to derail. Started to. It happened a few minutes back. Charlie, one thing we always ask folks, you mentioned Raging Bull, you mentioned The Deer Hunter. Is there any other mega blind spot? I know you sent us a few for the list, and we gravitated toward this one just because it feels like one you probably should have seen. Is there a certain genre you got a big blind spot in, or is there a mega movie, a Jurassic Park-sized movie you've not seen?
Ironically enough, I worked with Ariana from Jurassic Park. She kept trying to show me that. I could not stay awake the first 3 or 4 times I tried to watch Jurassic Park because I was working a lot and I felt terrible because it's such a great movie. But I can't think of a movie that I haven't seen that I should see.
I mean, I can think of 2.
I mean, we can think of 2. We've named them.
I can think of Deer Hunter and Raging Bull right off the top.
He needs to take a break from the heavy De Niro.
Outside of those 2 is what I mean. Yeah. So I'll take all the suggestions you got. I'll just keep listening to your guys' show. And then I'll keep having fake shows at home where I practice this whole thing.
You can just comment yep or nope whether you've seen the movie or not.
So we've named a couple Scorsese's, couple De Niro's. I know offline I mentioned one of my blind spots is Hardcore by Paul Schrader, the writer of this movie. And Cam said rectify that immediately, but not for this show. I will also say First Reformed, which Schrader wrote and directed a couple years ago. I really, really dug with Ethan Hawke. I recommend that one if folks have not seen it.
Oh, my God. Yeah, anything Ethan Hawke does.
That one stuck with me for months. I kept thinking about that movie.
Yeah, I like that one. I think Hardcore Hardcore makes this look like a romantic comedy, but Hardcore is my favorite Paul Schrader movie. From a directing stage, he obviously didn't direct Taxi Driver, but he wrote and directed Hardcore, and I think that's George C. Scott's best performance. Peter Boyle's in that one as well. It's a very, very good movie if you haven't seen it.
Oh my God, we didn't talk about Peter Boyle, underutilized in this film, but he also recognized the PTSD too. God bless Peter Boyle. Anything he's in, I'll watch. I love that guy.
Yeah, great in Young Frankenstein, great in Hardcore. I too am a big Peter Boyle fan. If he shows up in something, I'm here for it.
Can we start calling Charlie Wizard?
I mean, I don't see why not.
I'm getting there. Let me push that hair back for you.
I mean,
I was thinking about that last night when I was rewatching it. I was like, you see right there, you guys can't see it at home, but I'm pushing my hair back. I think old guys should bring back the completely bald on top with the long hair.
The gym teacher bald cut. Yeah,
that's gotta happen.
I mean, I'm here for it, Charlie. I could see you in a Peter Boyle type performance from Hardcore. You know, it's funny, Charlie, you consider yourself more of a comedic actor, and obviously you've done some amazing comedic roles. But as someone who has worked with you a couple times in 2 movies called Camera Obscura and Shelby Oaks, you are much closer to our Robert De Niro than you care to admit. So I think you sell yourself short in your ability to pull off some of these roles. So I'm just putting that out there.
Well, I'm going to keep doing that then, because maybe I'll keep working. And but you know what, you guys, you Aaron, you guys have all Paper Street in general has given me a new genre to explore and play with. Now that we don't do, that we don't have sitcoms or anything, I get to lean towards heavier roles and stuff like that. So love you guys for that always. And
thank you.
I'll
feeling is very mutual. Before we let you go, and I'm sure you do because you're the hardest working man in showbiz. You got anything out there in the world you want to plug or promote?
I have a movie coming out pretty soon. It's a Western called Killing Faith with Guy Pearce and Bill Pullman. I'm super jazzed about that. My brain was like melting because I can't even believe I'm in the same sentence as Bill Pullman. But
so fun fact, my dad went to high school with Bill Pullman.
No kid, he's such a nice dude.
I've heard nothing but good things about him. I've never met him, but my dad went to high school with him, and they spoke very lovingly of him. I know you also had a couple of big heavy hitter movies in 2024 come out, Rebel Ridge, Megalopolis, among others. So if you're not going to promote those, I will.
Oh, well, Megalopolis is on streaming now, and then Rebel Ridge has been on Netflix for a little bit now, and no, I'm pretty jazzed. I'm but a small cog in those films, but the nice thing is I was asked to work on those films, so I feel like it's bringing me in the right direction. So please, check them out. I mean,
small cog, but I popped when you popped up on screen in Rebel Ridge. I did not know you were in it.
That was our scheduling problem on Shelby Oaks.
That's also, right, but Shelby Oaks, I think with distance, I'd forgotten the title.
Yeah, we were scheduling around that movie, and I was like, come on, Charlie, pick the real movie, Shelby Oaks.
Well, ironically, the town was called Shelby, I think Shelby Woods or Shelby Oaks in Rebel Ridge.
That's funny.
So I was like, this is kind of great. This Shelby, this is amazing. No, yeah, but Jeremy Saulnier was very kind. He read me for a different role, really liked me, but they had another choice as well for that role. And I got a call during the pandemic, and they asked if I would be the teacher. And I was like, they're like, no, don't worry. We're going to pay your normal rate. Jeremy just really wants to give you some work, and he really liked your read and stuff like that. And I was like, all right. So I ended up, got to hang out with Jeremy Saulnier. I was like, I'm in a Jeremy Saulnier movie. What the hell happened?
Love him.
Nice.
You know why I love Charlie? Because the sentence I've never said to him is, I'm going to pay you your full rate. And he just keeps coming back. So that is...
one day we will. That's on us. We'll get there.
When we're making that sweet Jeremy Saulnier budget.
Listen,
you know what, though?
He does us a lot of favors.
You may not hit my rate, but you hit my heart and my creative button. And you guys have such a passion for what you do together, and that's just creating, that I will always want to work with you. You know, I was speaking with Mike Flanagan, when we were up in Canada, and I got to tears because I thought, wow, what a great group of people that Mike just connected with. Because you guys just really are, like, it's like seeing family every time I see you guys. So keep doing this and keep doing what you do and keep being creative, because all of this, you know, you're part of our zeitgeist. So keep making it happen.
We appreciate it, man. We will keep you in mind as always, whether it's sitcom, creepy guy.
The feeling is quite mutual. We're always looking to be in the Charlie Talbert business. So, Charlie, we won't keep you any longer. I know it's your birthday.
Yeah, this one-way relationship where we don't pay full rates and ask you to do podcasts on your birthday. No, this was a scheduling issue. Charlie swears it's okay that we took him away for 90 minutes for his birthday. But we do appreciate you making the time, sir, of course, for us. And thank you for watching the movie and talking to us about it.
Honored to be here. Thanks for having me, guys. And thank you, Marty. Bobby.
Marty, thank you for not shooting me with your gun.
All right, y'all. Have a beautiful day.
Thanks, awesome. Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie. Appreciate it, bud.
All right, later.
Good time.
See you, man. Our thanks again to Charlie Talbert. We love that man, and we love you too. Thank you for listening to this episode.
Real love fest there, Shawn.
Right?
I mean, coming off of Taxi Driver, it's the obvious.
Yeah, we went deep. You know, the actors will go deep with us on some of the topics and some of the
stuff. I love when this show becomes like serious film criticism, because like normally it's just like we watched Home Alone and we make jokes the whole time and we're funny and goofy, but then every once in a while we watch like a real American classic and talk to people who are smart about why that movie's great and have these serious conversations. I love it. It's like a palate cleanser, and then we can go back to like our dick and fart jokes. But this was it was a really great conversation with Charlie, who had a lot of really interesting insight.
Yeah, definitely. Scorsese, we mentioned, you know, he's had a lot of collaborators over the years he's reused. We talked about him having 10 features and counting with De Niro at the moment. Writer Paul Schrader, this was the first of 4 and counting collaborations with him, being Raging Bull, Last Temptation of Christ, Bringing Out the Dead, which I always champion. I think it's great. People don't seem to get that one.
I think Last Temptation of Christ and Bringing Out the Dead are 2 very, very underrated Scorsese classics.
Agreed. And yeah, this there's some stories about Schrader with this, like some of his own experiences. He found himself isolated. He found himself with a broken marriage and a job lost as a film reviewer. And, you know, his quote was he took to drifting, more or less living in his car and drinking a lot, fantasizing. And basically he worsened to where he had an ulcer, a bleeding ulcer in the hospital. His quote was, I was about 27. And when I was in the hospital, I realized I hadn't spoken to anyone in almost a month. So that's when the metaphor of the taxi cab occurred to me. This metal coffin that moves through the city with this kid trapped in it who seems to be in the middle of society, but is in fact alone.
And rumor has it that he was also inspired by a Harry Chapin song called Taxi, which is very much about the same thing. A lonely taxi driver kind of in the middle of everyone and knowing no one, basically. So it was interesting. It actually, the first draft of the script written in less than 2 weeks, which is kind of batshit when you think about it. Pretty crazy.
And again, we mentioned at the end of the show, like Hardcore and some others, First Reformed. If you haven't seen those, seek those out as well.
No, Schrader has gone on to become well as being a really great writer, but a very, very good, to this day, a very, very good filmmaker. So yeah, he and Scorsese are still making, for their age, there's some of the few of that era that are still making really meaningful films.
Yep, we talked about the sleaziness, the seediness of 1970s New York, which was really captured by Scorsese and another collaborator of his, DP Michael Chapman. This was the first of his 3 collaborations. He did The Last Waltz, which is arguably his greatest rock doc he's done, and Raging Bull. Chapman had an interesting career in general. He had done The Last Detail, he did Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and The Fugitive, but he also kind of became this journeyman who was doing a lot of comedy. He did also things like The Lost Boys. He did Scrooged, Ghostbusters 2, and Space Jam. So that's quite the varied
Wait a
cinematography
second.
resume.
He did Lost Boys. How dare you call the guy who shot Lost Boys a journeyman? That is a modern classic, sir, and I will hear nothing to the contrary.
Well, when you start doing things like, I shouldn't say journeyman. That's not, by the way, that's not a pejorative when people say that about directors and stuff. I just mean his career, he didn't become
He became
like
kind of a studio. He became kind of a studio.
He just, he was a working cinematographer.
Have you watched Space Jam recently? It is unwatchable.
I never liked it in the day. I got yelled at by my friends at the time. I didn't like the movie when it was out.
Not good. Not good.
It never was good. Another one we got to mention just because he's so iconic. Composer Bernard Herrmann, he's the man behind the iconic Psycho score, which he gets credited to this day just because anybody that ever goes, reep, 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 they owe him some kind of royalty or his family some kind of royalty.
He's still getting checks.
But I mean, if you don't know his name, I mean, he's along that Mount Rushmore with like Ennio Morricone and people like that, where beyond Psycho, he did every other major Hitchcock movie you can make. You can
Citizen Kane, The Magnificent Ambersons, Cat People, The Day the Earth Stood Still,
Jason and the Argonauts.
Jason and the Argonauts. I'm going by year. The Man Who Knew Too Much. You're literally
looking down.
The Wrong Man, Vertigo, North by Northwest, Psycho, Cape Fear, The Birds. Sorry, he was just a sound consultant on The Birds, my mistake. And then he started doing a bunch of De Palma stuff. He did Sisters.
Yep.
He did,
De Palma's who recommended him for this film to Scorsese. Because he did Obsession too, right?
He did. And weird turn of events here. He was actually, obviously, by the fact that we were just listing movies that came from the 40s and the 50s, he was very old at the time that he accepted this film. By the time it came time to conduct the orchestra, he couldn't do it. He was so frail, and he literally died hours after recording the score for this movie. So,
which I didn't learn that.
Rest in peace to that legend.
Reading either wiki or something, I did not know that about him. That this was it for him.
This was it. This is his last credit. His first credit was Citizen Kane. His last credit was Taxi Driver. How's that for a start and stop?
That's not bad.
Not too bad.
It's giving real John Cazale, as the children would say.
Yeah, he is the John Cazale of composers. Except he had 400 and Cazale had 5 performances.
Yeah, real jazzy vibe here until the big shootout ending where he kind of hits the strings real heavy.
Yeah, I love the score for this movie. You're much more of a score guy than I am. I'm someone who doesn't really notice the score if it's done well. But the score in this is fantastic. It really
this one doesn't seem to be subtle. You know, it's there. Like you definitely get.
No, but it knocks it out of the park. It very much puts you in the headspace of that character.
So in our own wrapping up, we usually do by the numbers segment, but I have a fun fact here. I will often run down the box office totals of the film and where it stood in its respective year. But this being the oldest film we've covered today, 1976, sites like Box Office Mojo, where we would pull that kind of stuff from, their own data begins a year after Taxi Driver, when a little bitty film called Star Wars took over and kind of changed the game, right? All we can say is the domestic and worldwide take was in the 28 million range for Taxi Driver. I'm not sure quite where that stands with the 70s, but they really started keeping track of that stuff much better come a post-Star Wars world. Yeah,
that's crazy. I didn't realize that. That's pretty wild. Well, good thing it shows up on pretty much every best of films list, every top 100.
I did a little of that research just because it is mentioned so often in them. So among them,
looking at the doc right now and seeing this kind of for the first time, because I didn't scroll this far down. I'm not a true professional. I'm kind of shocked by how low it is on many of these lists. But.
With some distance and more movies coming out, it does happen, but we'll say this. Variety did a Critics Picks 100 Best. It did not make that ranking. Collider's 100 Best. It did not make that ranking. I don't care about Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb, but I'll let you know that they were number 284 out of 300 on Rotten Tomatoes. Number 126 out of IMDb's top 250. Those are made by little rubber people who don't shave yet, to quote Point Break. So those lists don't hold up to me too well. Stacker had it number 61 on the top 100. Empire had it as 55 on their top 100. AFI had it as number 47 of the 100 greatest American films. Time Out ranked it as 45 among their 100 best all time. And then Time Magazine put out 100 without ranking, and it listed among those as well. So yeah, it still makes lists. I think between this, Raging Bull, and Mean Streets, maybe Scorsese kind of cannibalizes himself sometimes on these lists, that some people might just prefer the others. And Raging Bull might be in a spot where you believe Taxi Driver should be, or vice versa.
Yeah, it's funny. I want to say Taxi Driver I felt like it was higher up on the 1998 version of that AFI list, but it doesn't look like, after doing a little bit of research right now, it's only a couple spots higher.
I know, I thought it was too. My memory was that thing was like a top 20, but
yeah, I'm a little surprised
it might have been Raging Bull was blurred in my head as the one that
yeah, Raging Bull is usually listed ahead of it. For me, Taxi Driver is the top, but I can certainly see that argument. But yeah, I mean, look, top 40, top 50 greatest films of all time is nothing to sneeze at. But yeah, for me, maybe even a little higher. But it's just being on all those lists is quite an accomplishment.
As we talked about too, just the prescience of that movie in a few ways, and just thematically, we are in a world where like there is a loneliness epidemic right now, and like social media and the internet truly made it worse in some regards. So like there's a lot of meat on the bone to this movie to watch even nowadays, and you can
it definitely does not feel dated. I mean, there are parts of it like that New York doesn't exist anymore, but like the social stuff, the things Travis is going through, the things the other characters are going through, it definitely does not feel dated at all. Right? It feels very much of the era,
that's kind of sad.
Yeah, which is both sad and speaks to how well the film was made and how good the performances are. But yeah, it's a little sad that we're almost going back that direction. Social media has become kind of the new thing that is alienating everyone and keeping people to themselves. But that's
Schrader's metaphor.
Save you that diatribe. But I don't know. I'm curious to see how the 11-year-old kids are going to turn out who can't get their heads out of the cell phone.
Schrader's metaphor, like he said, was he's all around society, yet he's very alone. And it's the same way now. We're arguably more connected than ever, yet we're more isolated.
Yeah, the world's never been so small. Like you can email someone in Bangkok and they can respond back in 30 seconds, but also no one talks to each other anymore because we're all behind devices, which is kind of sad when you think about it. So yeah, it's we're in an interesting world right now, but one where Taxi Driver definitely still holds up.
Yep. I only know two things, and one of them is that one night in Bangkok can make a hard man humble.
That's true. So, but what is the other thing?
That I gotta go to the bathroom. So
it has been a long record. It has.
No, we appreciate you folks tuning into this. This was a nice conversation with Charlie. We love him, and we very much appreciated kind of digging real deep into this movie. I was very glad to revisit it myself, and very fun to watch. And like Cameron said, it hits home how much it still works and makes sense in this kind of societal rot that is never ending. So let's end on a downer.
Yeah, way to really bring the people down, Shawn. Good job.
Okay. Go out and do better and be better, and then we'll all get better, right?
I think Shawn's getting at is I am God's lonely man.
Indeed. This has been a presentation of the Paper Street Podcast. Thank you again to Charlie Talbert. Thank you to my partner in crime here, Cameron. Charlie was late to the party, but we're very glad he made it. For that doofus, this doofus says thank you for listening to our nonsense, and don't be late to the party.
Or else.
Someday, a real rain will come and wash all the scum off the streets.